Let's imagine this. You want to have a clean slate with learning English. You want to have a good score, perhaps in YDS or IELTS. So you started memorizing some new vocabulary. You made a list with Turkish definitions of the words right next to them, and you started memorizing 5 to 10 words every single day. For the first couple of days, it's going all right, but after a week or so, things started to get messy. You feel like you're down and you're confused. And after a while, maybe 2 months later, you started to give up. Does it sound familiar? If so, this video is for you. Memorizing the Turkish definitions of the English words won't add you much because you don't need that definition while using that particular word in any given skill. Let's say you're trying to read a passage, a text in English, and you know all the words in the sentence, but still you can't understand that statement. Why? Because you think you know them with their Turkish definition, those words, but that sentence doesn't create an image in your mind because you can't understand the connection and relationship between that particular word and other expressions in the sentence. The strategy to overcome this very common problem is to use the set of vocabulary that you're trying to memorize in your skills, like reading or listening or speaking. The more you try to incorporate those words into your skills, the more meaningful they will become. Because having a set of vocabulary that you can't use in your skills is like having a toolbox or a repair kit that you can't use to repair things. You know the tools inside, how they work, but when it comes to repairing things, you don't know which tool to use when. Vocabulary and grammar are the resources of the language, and we can't say we learn the language by only having resources. When you use them in your reading, writing, listening, or speaking, then they would become meaningful. So if we understand what the actual problem here is with memorizing vocabulary and what we should do, let's talk about how we should be learning new words. But first things first, I'd like to talk about what learning is, because out of experience, I can say, unfortunately, many people don't know what learning is. The definition of learning is observable and permanent change in the behavior. So what is our behavior here? We can't recall a certain word at the time of speaking. So what we want to change it into? We want to change it into recalling it at the time of speaking. The critical point here is not understanding, changing the behavior, because many people think that understanding is learning. No, learning is not understanding. For example, when you see a football player doing an overhead kick, you can understand that that football player is doing an overhead kick. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you changed your behavior to do an overhead kick in any kind of football match or whatever, in any case. I hope this analogy makes sense. We said we're going to be using the words in our skills. How are we going to do this? We're going to use AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, or any AI application that you want to use. I want you to write a prompt with the words that you'd like to memorize or learn. Let's pick 5 of them or so, because the higher the number, the more challenging it will get. And we will want ChatGPT to generate us a B1 level-ish, A to B1 level-ish text. We read it and we understand all the bits and pieces of the text. And then comes the memorization part. I don't want you to memorize the vocabulary, but I want you to memorize the text. It doesn't have to be a perfect memorization, but our target vocabulary is like our checkpoint. So we are trying to reach those words, the target words, in the text with our memorization. I want you to retell the story to yourself by trying to reach to those target words. Each time you're trying to tell yourself the story, you're creating a memory. So I want you to do this at least 3 times a day. But the important point here is you're trying to reach out to those 5 new words. Those are our target words. And the memorization of the text shouldn't be perfect. Don't care about it, but try to tell yourself the story. And do it for 3 times a day. The second point here is uttering the words. Don't say that I'm thinking about the passage, so it will work. No. You should utter the words, say them aloud, so your brain can somehow process the story and recreate your memory. And the next day, we're going to do the same thing. But the idea here is to generate another story. We want AI to generate another story with the same 5 words. This time we are going to memorize the different story with the same words, and we will retell the story to ourselves 3 times within the day again. The third day, it's the same. Another story with the same words. So for 5 days within a week, if you do this, I bet you, I assure you, you can't ever forget those 5 words at all. But if you don't want to use this strategy with reading, you can use it with listening as well. You can get the AI application to generate you a listening material with those 5 new words, but it should be simple enough for you to understand and memorize again. So keep it around A2, B1 level. And when you listen, you should be able to memorize it again. If you can't memorize with the first take, let's say, listen to it for 5 times, 10 times, I don't know. So you can memorize it. After memorizing, retell the story to yourself, the listening material, 3 times within the day. So you can repeat the same words again and again and again, so you can memorize them. The strategy here is to use the deductive method. In the deductive method, we have a structure, our reading or listening material, and our units as our target vocabulary. By trying to remember the structure, our reading text, we are forcing our brain to memorize the target vocabulary. It's like trying to remember your favorite childhood memory. When you remember the memory itself, the structure, you start remembering the other details, like the shirt you were wearing in the memory, or any kind of smell within the memory. I'm curious about your opinion, so please share your ideas with me in the comments below. Do you think this method could work for you, and are you planning to give it a try? Do not feel obliged to speak English or write in English, technically. Because I'm speaking English in here, you can write your comments either in Turkish or in English. For the last part of this video, I'd like to tell you about why I'm speaking English in this video as a Turk. For almost 20 years of teaching English, I've always tried to motivate my students to get the opportunity, to seize the opportunities of speaking English with others. Matter of fact, I try to motivate them to find people to speak English with. Why am I doing so? Why am I trying to motivate my students to find someone to speak English with? It's because I know the comfort zone's nature. Many people don't, unfortunately. Comfort zone is not something static, it's dynamic. The more you wait in your comfort zone, the more it will shrink. But the more you challenge yourself with getting out of your comfort zone, the more it will expand. Many people are waiting to be ready to find someone to speak, to start speaking English with people. They are waiting to be ready with their grammar. They are waiting to be ready with their vocabulary. They are waiting to be ready with the lessons that they've taken. I don't know, they are waiting for something, but it's not about waiting. It's about, if you're like A2, B1 level-ish, if you know the basics of English language, you should put them in practice. When you start putting your skills into practice, you start to learn that you are getting ready at the time of practice. So it's about challenging your comfort zone. It's actually learning to challenge your comfort zone. And I'm also challenging my comfort zone right in front of this camera speaking English. It's not an easy task for me, trust me. And I'd like to be a role model for my students or for the other learners of English. If I can do this, you can do that. If you have people to speak English with around you, speak. If you don't, stay tuned, subscribe to my channel because I'm going to be telling you about how to find people to speak English with in my videos. Follow me on my Instagram, servethocaofficial, and my webpage, servethoca.com. So, see you next time. Take care.